Department of Fish and Wildlife. Thank you. And I am up here on the North Coast in Eureka. I'm joined by my colleague, Michael Prawl, who can introduce himself. And I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a feel for what we're hoping to get out of this today and kind of how it's structured. So we have, and to apologize, my dog is sleeping next to my feet, and he's a little pug with a smashed face, so therefore he's a very loud snorer. So if you hear
him now,
and he hasn't even gotten started yet, so much so, apologize. He's just happy the sun is out. So we have about 4 guiding questions today, in addition to a general question regarding the presentation that Becky gave. So we're going to start by clarifying any questions that you might have had about that presentation, and then go over our guiding questions. And Avery will be able to screen share so we can see that question to kind of help guide our discussion. Avery will also be able to capture our discussion in real time on notes. If you could, please raise your hand, send the chat, everything that Becky said. And then as you comment, if you want to raise your hand and introduce yourself with your first comment, that would be a wonderful addition, so we can know a little bit about more where you're stationed. And with that, I would like to ask the first question. Are there any clarifying questions or issues that you had about what you saw in Becky's presentation today? Or was it just so phenomenal that it floored you? Nothing? Okay, well, that's fine. If anything,
just since we're such a small group, if you want to just, introduce yourself and just say what you're, how you come here today and what you're interested in, that could be a little bit of an icebreaker as well.
That'd be great.
I'll start, since I'm environmental scientist with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I work out of the Eureka office. My home office is in Trinidad, actually, so that's really where I work in the new normal that we exist in. So that's that.
I'll go ahead and go next. I'm Gina Contolini. I'm also currently working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife in Eureka as a Sea Grant Fellow. And yeah, my home office is in Arcata. So
that is really funny that, we should probably know who you are, but we don't.
Because the office is closed. I never actually got a space in the office, but there were some empty cubicles I would have claimed if it weren't COVID.
Well, welcome, Gina, and it's nice to meet you.
I'm Karen Reyna. I work for the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary. I'm a resource protection coordinator. And, when you broke the line at San Francisco, we manage areas south of San Francisco, so I was like straddling. But most of our sanctuary goes up to the southern Mendocino coast. And there's some specific things I think I can, talk about on the North Coast. So, but I am kind of straddling 2 regions.
Great. Yeah. And if you wanted to tell us some things and then, go jump into the central, we wouldn't be offended as if you felt like you wanted to do that. So feel free.
My colleague, Karen Grimmer, who's with the Monterey Bay Sanctuary, I think is in the central. So
cool.
We're tag teaming.
Great.
Could you say one more time the name of the sanctuary you're from? I didn't quite catch it.
Oh, Greater Farallones.
Thanks.
Farallones. Yeah.
Okay.
Close.
Oh, close. Yeah, there you go. We go up to be very specific, we manage the area between Ano Nuevo up to basically just north of the Point Arena Lighthouse, Manchester Beach. And so we overlap with MPAs in that space.
Well, we're glad you joined our North Coast group, Karen.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce yourself, and then I can introduce myself, and then we can get into it?
Oh, did she say, sorry, did you say for me to introduce myself?
Oh, yeah, if you'd like to.
Sure. This is Cal Allison. I'm the director of the MPA Collaborative Network. And basically, if you aren't familiar, we have 14 county-based collaboratives across the state along the coast that help bring together stakeholders at the local level to assist Fish and Wildlife with the management of the marine protected areas. And I'm interested because a pretty large percent of our membership, I think we're at 34%, are some type of city, county, state, or federal agency representative or tribal representative. So there's just a lot of concerns and interest in providing input and receiving information from that community that it needs to be able to respond to their constituents and community members as well, and have a little bit different perspective from an agency versus a recreational user or a nonprofit would. So that's why I'm here.
Cool. Good to have you, Kala.
And
We don't see you that often on the north. So
Yeah, I tried to get up there as much as I can. Yeah, and we have also the South Coast specialist with our team is in the South Coast, and our program managers in the Central Coast. But I've definitely spent the most time, three of us, on the North Coast. So I'm in here with you guys. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, you guys. I think we have one person left. Am I wrong? And that is Avery.
yeah, that's me. Hi, everyone. My name is Avery. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a facilitator with Strategic Earth, so I'll be taking notes. Please jump in if I misspell anything. And yeah, I feel like with that, we can get started. So maybe we'll ask one more time. If anybody had any upfront clarifying questions about the information that Becky presented, or just like general pressing questions that you have for Mike or Elizabeth about the review or MPAs.
Okay, so and if something occurs to you as we're going through the other questions, please feel free to say, hey, can we revisit this? We can absolutely do that. I think our size of our group is going to allow us to be a little bit more flexible. So like I said, we have these, 4 overarching questions that we're going to hopefully be able to get through all of them. Avery is highlighting it on the screen that is shared, so we should all be able to see it. And the first one of those questions is, what are your highest priority topics or issues and sources of information that should be considered in the Decadal Management Review? What would you like to see? Like, this is an opportunity, kind of the way that I'm thinking about it as I'm talking with the various groups that we're holding these webinars with, is like, what would be your gold standard? What would you like to see in the report? You open it up and you go, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that this discussion is included. Is there anything, or is what would be helpful? Like Kala, you said in your position as the collaborative network that you have a lot of people at various levels of government, right? So is there a particular discussion maybe about governance or how a city could become involved with their MPAs? You know, would something like that be helpful, or do you feel like those entities have that information? How people can get plugged in? Is there anything like that that you think would be helpful to include in the management review from that kind of perspective?
Yeah, I was just noodling on it because I want to have like 50 different answers to that question. Sorry. I think a lot of it that the questions people are getting are they working, you know? And I think as far as, you know, government staff, is how best to answer that and where to direct people to, and how to, you know, channel the energy of wanting to engage, especially, you know, from local municipalities, for example. Is there a way to have a I know there's a couple cities that are trying to put together a sustainability committee within, their city manager's office that would, directly respond to these things and provide input at city council meetings and get support from a local city. So maybe having opportunities like that identified, both as a way to disseminate information about what's happening from the review, and also as a way to receive information from the community, maybe at a little bit more formal level other than what they already do through the collaboratives, has popped into my head on this level for the governance audience. I think seeing themselves is always good too, how seeing how they're participating and contributing to MPA management. I think that's powerful for the staff level of government agencies that might want to communicate to their higher ups how they've been participating and been a part of the process. Especially for future involvement, if they want to justify, staying involved in the collaboratives or contributing resources to education and outreach, or patrolling, if they have law enforcement involved in patrolling and assisting Fish and Wildlife with the enforcement aspect, being able to justify that has something that's contributed to the effective management of MPAs. I think that would be really powerful for their continued involvement.
That makes sense. Kella, when you talk with these groups that you've been referencing in relation to the MPAs working, do you get any nuance in that question of what they think of as what working MPAs would actually be doing? Or is it kind of just a general sense of protection and wildlife not being taken? And
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's a great question, because I always want to respond with that question as well. Well, what do you mean by working? Which, sometimes comes across a little snotty. It's and I probably do the same thing as Fish and Wildlife. It's like, well, they need time in order, to actually work. It's only been 10 years, and but from what we can see at the Channel Islands, so being able to reference the studies we can reference. But that's a great point, is how, and that's something I think everybody wants to see in this report, is what do we mean by success? What do we mean by working? Is it more fish? Is it a more robust ecosystem? Is it bigger fish? Is it, less urchin barrens? Like what? And I think you will find that the definition of success is going to vary according to region, and maybe even MPA and different county. Because I would tell you, for the Mendocino folks, for example, they're going to see success more as a return of the kelp. That they're going to have maybe a very specific focus, where it might be different in other places. And feedback also that's kind of unique to the North Coast, I think, is, where they feel it wasn't as much of an issue, that their ocean waters weren't in as much trouble as the other regions. So you're not going to see as big of a change. So how do we define success specifically for the North Coast? I think that is going to be a question that's going to come up, because it comes up regularly in collaboratives as well.
That's a great point. Yeah, because I've been wrestling with that question in the part of my job where I work with monitoring data and stuff is on the North Coast. How do you talk about it? Because it's, in some cases, you're not going to see the responses that you see like in Southern California.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gina.
Yeah, I think those are all really great points. So I've been working with North Coast book help management for the last year and a half. And in terms of when we're on this topic of like defining success for the MPAs, it's come up a lot where people want to do active restoration within the MPAs, and they think the MPAs are there to make the ocean what we think it should be. But I'm just like looking at the brief list of the 4 pillars, and I don't see restoration in there. It might be, in the details somewhere, but I don't want us, like, if restoration isn't like a main pillar of the MPAs, I don't want us to, make it that way when we're reviewing it and say they failed because they didn't restore the environment or we weren't allowed to restore it there. And I just think that's I don't know, it's an interesting misconception maybe. What other people feel about that? Like, are they meant to be used to restore the environment? Like, should that be a measurement of success?
Yeah, I think when you look at the goals, I'm not sure if they use the word restoration, but there's this kind of implied notion of recovery, and I think there's some nuance to that, because there's active restoration, right, which is kind of what you're talking about people wanting to go help, basically destroy urchins. But that is something that we could probably do a better job of messaging, because active restoration is not something that we currently allow in marine reserves, so yeah.
So just a quick check on this. Well, 2 things. First, restoration is contemplated in the MLPA but not active restoration like that. Like, one of the goals is to help restore and rebuild and recover. So the active restoration is a separate issue. But also, we've kind of segued into one of our other questions, which is, how do we define success?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to do a quick check. Is everybody comfortable moving now wholeheartedly into that question? Just want to check with everybody to make sure that we don't have anything else to add on what are our highest priority topics or issues or sources of information question to include in the DMR before we move forward. Karen, I see that you went off of mute. Do you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, again, from a perspective of a federal agency that also has, management jurisdiction over these areas, and in terms of enforcement, and so let me put it this way. To the extent that information about enforcement and compliance can be made public, I think it's really important, and I know that's one of the pillars, but it is really important to put that information out to the community, especially in an area on the North Coast where there's not as many people, and there's potential perceptions of not as much enforcement. Perception. There's not as much of an enforcement presence. And also just, being okay with letting the public know that, because my biggest concern is that, if you're not monitoring, if you don't have benchmarks to monitor for compliance and enforcement, and how do you link success to actually, protecting these areas, especially in marine reserves, if you've got high levels of poaching or what have you. And so to the extent that that enforcement piece can be upfront and let the public know, if there's just more enforcement down south, so be it. But be frank and fair with the public about that, because I think when you get into managing for success, you've got to know if that's going to be a contributing factor to potential failures and or successes of individual MPAs or MPs in a certain region.
Karen, can I ask a clarifying question? lack of enforcement came up in our discussions with the non-consumptive group yesterday, and particularly about the North Coast. And I was curious if you feel like there is a perception that there is, and we also heard that there was the enforcement theme in the other breakout groups in the Central and South. And so the question is, do you think there's a perception on the North Coast or the areas you work in that the North area is underrepresented when it comes to enforcement?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Can I, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, please.
I was just going to pile on this one, just since I'm literally out in Catalina, just wrapping up an enforcement training for allied agency officers, and we're doing it across the whole state for a second time. And I really agree. This is hugely important. I think, you know, having transparency for enforcement actions from Fish and Wildlife is helpful. And I'm doing my darndest to get those similar stats from our allied agency partners, because I think we're not going to get the full picture. If we do get those stats from Fish and Wildlife, we need to also know what state park rangers are doing, what city PD are doing to help, county sheriffs, you know, the NOAA officers, NOAA OLE, and BLM rangers. Like, there's so many allied agencies that are out there also gaining compliance of MPA regulations. And I think that we need to have that information. So that's one, as far as a source of information. And we're trying to gather that up in a way that can be represented in the DMR report, at least as an appendix. But also, you know, contributing for the future, they have insights about, like, this boundary line is impossible to enforce. And if you moved it literally 10 feet to this point, or, you know, they have that local insight of how enforceable some of those lines are on the ground and where some trouble spots are. So I think that is invaluable information to get from the local agency enforcement staff.
Thanks. And I just kind of have a follow-up, and I realize that Karen and Kala, you may not have an answer to this, but I'm just kind of going through different scenarios in my mind. Would it be worthwhile, maybe not worthwhile, would you see it a better use of the report to have a discussion about the need and the potential to, like, partner with other agencies in enforcement, kind of like that, versus the hardcore numbers like Kala is talking about, or somehow combine the two? Because we're hearing this overarching theme of enforcement. So it seems like everybody understands that there's areas in particular where the current level of enforcement is not enough. So what I'm thinking is, if we recognize that, is there something that, some data source, some discussion point that would be helpful for you, your agencies, to have included in the report, so that it could then be taken back to an agency and say, hey, look, this is a need, this is how we can plug in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can speak to this. Well, you know, in terms of, again, federal, in terms of our ability to actually enforce state law, like, we really don't do that. So when you get down to the Channel Islands, where there's the actual protected areas that go, that overlay with the Channel Islands Marine Sanctuary, you actually get that federal state partnership. But our agency, which is a big chunk, I mean, we, you know, from the Monterey Bay Sanctuary to the Fairlawn Sanctuary, we're talking Cambria to just north of Point Arena, right? So it's a big chunk of coast. And we just don't have that. We don't do MPA enforcement. We rely on the state. So when you say partner agencies, I would rely more on the state. So in answer to your question from a federal perspective, I think the state of California needs to understand how well their resources are being protected, not just by the regulations, but by enforcement and compliance. And so I'd rather see numbers, and I know this is tough because it's going to expose some vulnerabilities. But I'd rather see numbers, and I'd also like to see, you know, cases and where they're going. Like I know, and Kelly can speak to this, you know, in San Francisco, the DAs don't take cases. So like, they're like, yeah, we get a murder a day here. We're not taking some wildlife case. So like, even if the enforcement folks do something, there's not necessarily that compliance piece on the other end where it reinforces that enforcement action. And so I think really taking a holistic look at this and bringing it to light is going to help all of us. And then as a federal agency, we can look to ways to support, you know, be it our boats, you know, if you guys have a lack of vessels in a certain area or whatever it is, I think that's where we can plug in, but we need to understand the lay of the land a little bit better. I mean, again, I know these things, but it's not necessarily publicly known. For example, like the marlin went down for like 9 months, you know, so like that's the one boat going on in San Francisco. So like, what's happening when the marlin's down? Who's out there looking? And this was during COVID when like everybody was out there. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that it's really, I think, in our best interest for the protection of these areas to be very clear about enforcement needs and showing the numbers.
Okay, that's helpful, at least in my mind, is, you know, we're kind of trying to generate this report and move forward with what's actually going to be helpful to people, what you're expecting to see, what you're hoping to see. And I see Gina's hand is up. Gina, do you have a comment?
Yes, it is quite unrelated to things that were just discussed, but it's brief. It's just in terms of data sources I would like to see used, and I'm sure you're planning on using these, but I know there's a ton of fishery independent data sets all over California, from all over California's coast, because there's so many universities. And I would really like to see those. It'd be horrible if those were just not used somehow in the review. So I just felt like I needed to say that. In addition, of course, to the fishery dependent data. So for fishery independent data, one big data set that comes to mind is as the PSCO data set. And I actually saw one of the folks pop in for like 5 seconds to this room, Emily Sarman. I was hoping she was going to speak about, you know, all the data they've been collecting, but then she left. So I just wanted to say that because part of the question was data sets. That's all.
Thanks. And then Karen, if you have something to add, and then we can move on to our next question.
Yes. Sorry, I don't use Zoom a lot. Okay, there, I lowered my hand. So I did, in terms of data sets, and maybe it's more of a question, but just understanding, I mean, I know a lot of data sets are being produced as part of just ongoing monitoring. And my question is more like, you know, there are data sets that may be monitoring in MPAs, but not for the purpose of MPA management. And I'm just wondering how this report wants to take that information in. And is that going to be made clear if you're seeking information about other data sets and how, because we do have information that, you know, that we would probably share through that data call, even if it wasn't asked of us to do it for MPA monitoring.
Yeah, maybe I can plug in here too. I feel like the collaborative network was asked to submit kind of an addendum, a report, and I feel like we're kind of playing cleanup crew a little bit. So one of the things we're doing is trying to track all those data sets and, you know, independent, you know, research and things that aren't maybe included in the official monitoring plan, and just linking to all of them in one big spreadsheet. So that's something we're working on too, and including a lot of the community science stuff, and as you know, PSCO and marine and limpets, and there's quite a few of our collaborative members that are doing other research in and around MPAs as well that they would like to contribute. So I think it's a great point, because I'm trying to figure out how to do that in a way that's helpful, and that can be incorporated into the report somehow, even if it is just stuck at the end.
Okay.
Before we move on, Avery, do you mind? I see something in the notes. It says federal can't enforce state law. I may have said that, but I was talking specifically. I would just say can't always support or enforce state law, because it really just depends on what the agency's jurisdiction is. So I just don't want.
Yeah, because Keenan has been coming to our enforcement trainings on behalf of NOAA OLE, so he is getting trained up, and we work with them as allied agency. And I mean, this is another topic, because I know the state wants help enforcing marine mammal disturbance from NOAA, and then they want help with the MPA. So there's just lots of opportunity for cross mutual aid.
I just don't want to be like, what do you mean feds can't enforce? Because there are cross-pollination opportunities. It just depends on law. So anyway, thank you.
That's an important qualifying statement that that was good.
Really quickly, and Mike, if you have anything you want to add to this point, please jump in, feel free. A lot of the data sets that I just heard in this little last couple minutes, we actually are working with to incorporate those. We have, like Becky said in her presentation, baseline monitoring that was done, and then we're just receiving the reports from the long-term monitoring that's been underway. And then those are from our kind of formalized scientific partners that have been doing that research on those key habitats within the MPA network. And then from other groups that are partner organizations like MPA Watch and the collaboratives, they're submitting partner reports. So we're going to work in as much of that as we can. So I think that I'm fairly confident in saying that I think that those data sets that I heard highlighted are all going to be included. And then also to just point out that I really want to reiterate that the commission process will have an opportunity for public comment as well. And so I don't want you to think that this is just, a one-time and done thing. So unless you have anything else to add, Mike, I would say that we can move on to our next question.
No, other than,
Okay.
just to echo that we, both Elizabeth and I and our team members, are actively working to incorporate monitoring data with a lot of those data sources you mentioned into our report. And, to Karen's point, if there are additional data sets that you know of that you think aren't being represented, we definitely want to have pathways to get that information. So, and obviously, Cal, you guys are doing some heavy lifting trying to get those community sources. So yeah, we appreciate all that work you're doing.
Okay, so our next question. Okay, now I can see it. I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a lag on my screen. How would you define, measure, and/or assess progress toward MLPA Act goals? What? Sorry, I'm not really accepting the fact that my eyesight is going and I need to go to the optometrist because clearly my eyesight is going. Okay, let's try this again. How would you define, measure, and/or assess progress toward Marine Life Protection Act goals? See, got closer, I could read it. So, does anybody have any thoughts on that? So are you all familiar with the 6 goals of the MLPA? I guess that would be a good starting point. I see Karen shaking her head. I have to scroll down. Oh, Kelly, your screen's off. I know you are. Gina?
I'm reading through them right now.
Okay.
I think I was going to say real quick though, Elizabeth, that it's I'm stuck on this one a little bit because there's the goals of the act as far as like outcome. Well, no, it's actually one of the goals because I'm stuck on effective management. So, I guess this goes back to success is, you know, the outcome, are they working, but are we effectively managing them in order to be able to say whether they're working? I feel like those are two totally different buckets.
Yeah, but I think
Does that
they're
make sense?
complementary. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And that is one of the goals, you know, to effectively manage it as a statewide network.
Yeah.
So, oh, Karen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, you know, the one, so I am familiar with the 6 goals. And then also, you know, I was involved in the North Central Coast stakeholder process way back when. And we had specific goals and objectives that we had set out for our region. And it's, I guess, maybe more of a question, but is there going to be, or maybe it's actually a suggestion, is there going to be kind of an assessment of, you know, each of the regions' goals that were set out, you know, for those regions versus the 6 goals, and kind of a look to see if there's a way to address things that may have been left out of some regions versus others. And I'll cut to the chase and give you the direct example. In my region, it was very important for us to address issues that would lead you to have a decision on special closures because of the lots of very sensitive wildlife areas in this region. And so that became one of the goals of that, you know, overarching region. And then the North Coast did that as well, but that wasn't a consideration in other areas. So I'm just wondering, like, if there's going to be an assessment of the benchmarks of how each region is doing based on those 6 goals, and if there's some adjustments that need to be made.
So I love that you brought this up personally, and I don't know if we were in the same work group in the North Central Coast, but I was at every single one of those RSG meetings and the seabirds and marine mammals special work group. So I absolutely hear what you're saying with that. And you're right, there were the 6 goals, there were the regional goals and objectives, and then there were MPA site-specific goals and objectives. So the regional stakeholder group would come and say, this meets this specific goal, this is what we intend, this is our purpose. So what I'm hearing, that it would be helpful potentially to include some sort of discussion of those regional differences in the report, and then use that as a potential measure for success if those are being met, and understanding that it would be different from region to region. Okay.
Yeah, because every region didn't put emphasis on different goals in different ways for those 6. So it would be really helpful to go back to the original intent of each region.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, be forefront with that. I encourage it.
That's really good input.
Like
yeah. That's something we haven't heard. And that's, and Elizabeth, I know that's one of your favorite topics. So that's awesome that you brought that up, Karen.
Yeah. I try to keep, you know, my own perspective out of it, but yes, I appreciate that comment quite a bit. Does anybody have anything else you want to add or expand on for this question? I'll let you hear the lovely sounds of Henry snoring. Oh, and he stops. He's got sleep apnea, so he stopped right at that moment. So if we don't have anything else to add for this question, I say we can move on to the next one. Does that sound good?
Sounds like a good plan.
All right. Avery is going to help support us. So, I like this one too. I think we can have some good input on this. What role would you like your community to play in the MPA management program moving forward? Nothing? Come on. Think about it. Again, what would be like, how would you like to see yourselves plugged in? Is there a role that you see that you go, gosh, you know what? This is really lacking right now in my community. I think this is how my agency can tie in, or this is what's currently happening and it's not really working. Do you see a specific just role your community can help moving forward?
I'll speak up. Okay, so I just want to be clear on what I'm defining as community. Because we have so many, but we do have an advisory council, and each sanctuary does. And they have been at every sanctuary, have been and will be continually interested in any updates. And it's a way to get out to the broader community, because they are representing basically all stakeholders. And so I just would, to the extent, especially when you're going through this review, I would encourage you, the state of California has a seat on our advisory council. I'm pretty sure they have a seat on every advisory council. I think Mike Escrow from OPC sits on it for us. But, it might be appropriate for someone from the department to come and talk to our advisory council, because you get the information out to a lot of people very quickly. So I guess, and that's for each sanctuary. And again, we're talking about a significant chunk of coast. So I encourage that and would make that offer. And, I'm sure any other sanctuary would make that offer as well.
Great, thank you. Kala.
Yeah, this one's a tough one for us too, because there's so many ways the collaboratives can plug in and provide information. And I feel like we're constantly scrambling around to try to put it together in a way that, is the most helpful and leads us to more effective management. And I think the state leans on us to do that. And I think it's been great as far as supporting some collaborative projects, but I think support for the collaboratives themselves for kind of wrangling this diverse community input, and kind of wrangling the use of in-kind resources, and leveraging existing resources from our local agency partners. I think kind of we have an official MOU, but just really kind of acknowledging and providing support for that assistance for MPA management moving forward would be huge. It's like the first 10 years was kind of testing out the model, really seeing the value in it. And I feel like the next 10 is like, okay, let's really put this in place and put it to work and, put some resources behind it.
Thanks. That's helpful information from both of you. And I actually have a follow-up question for Karen. In coming to the meetings, right, especially now in the era of COVID, getting to meetings in a in-room situation is oftentimes difficult. Is there a second option to get information to the advisory council or the sanctuary council meetings? And if it's not just a Zoom meeting, like would a written blurb work or something like that if we put it? I see you shaking your head, so I will stop and let you answer.
Yes. And all advisory councils have coordinators, and they can provide information, even not when in a meeting. So I'm happy to give you all the names of the Fairlawns and Cordell are about to get new ones, but Cordell's offshore. But anyway, but I'm happy to give you the names of those folks. But also, everyone's virtual right now. So any meeting that would occur, for the foreseeable future, at least in the next 3 months, I would expect it not to be in person. So it makes it easier for you to pop in from the north, even if the meeting's quote unquote in San Francisco. But yeah, but the advisory council coordinators are absolutely there to be a conduit of like official communications and information. So please, I'll give you those names. I mean, how should I do that?
You can either put them in the chat, or you can tell me now, or you can email them to me.
I have a follow-up question on that, Karen. I believe there's one of those sanctuary advisory panels meetings this Friday. Is that Monterey or is that?
Might be. This is kind of 'tis the season.
Yeah.
We have ours in December, but I can check.
So the question is, since I know our supervisor Steve Wirtz is attending that, and I'm curious, just knowing that you've got Monterey Bay, you've got Cordell Bank, you've got Fair Lawns. Do you know if we have had representatives attending each one of those or not? It sounds like you're saying we haven't.
Not well, Cordell Bank, no, because they're offshore, but OPC is the agency that has for Fair Lawns has been the state agency assigned or state entity assigned, but it goes to the resources agency, and the resource agency decides who goes. So Monterey, it might be Steve, and then in Fair Lawns, it's Mike Escrow. So you guys have been involved with Monterey Bay Sanctuary, and I think Channel Island haven't been involved with Fair Lawns.
Okay, I just asked that because oftentimes, as kind of the lower level staff, we're not the ones going to those meetings, so we don't necessarily know who's been involved or who hasn't. So I apologize for not knowing what my own organization is doing, but I'm asking that so that I can bring that to our team and kind of address what our participation in that. So thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I what I'm saying is that because this is such an important, point of reflection for this program, we want to be available to help spread the word, and that's one of the ways we can help to maybe some people who won't be dialed into the state stuff.
Got it. Thanks.
And I'll send you an email, Elizabeth, because I got to pull the name. Okay, thank you.
That would be great. And it's just elizabeth.pope@wildlife.ca.gov. And I can chat that to you as well, if that will be helpful. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll do
I
that.
probably still have your email address, but yes.
You probably do, but it has been like 10 years. So, which I don't think I even had to wear glasses when I was on that. So
me neither. These are new too.
Well, okay. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Avery. I appreciate that very much. It's in the notes now. Okay. So does anybody have anything else to add?
Just a sec to interrupt. Is it wildlife.ca.gov or ca?
Oh, yeah. Wildlife.ca.gov. Okay,
great.
Thank you, Gina.
I think the other way might get you to Canada, maybe. I'm not sure.
Oh, that'd be great. Okay. So just checking, anybody else have anything to add on this particular question, or are we good moving on? Okay. Avery, take us to the top, please. Look at that. We have some wonderful notes. Okay. All right. So our last question. Are there any other reflections or recommendations regarding MPA management and the role of the ocean community in the broader MPA program? So is there anything that we haven't discussed, covered in these couple of questions that you just really want to share regarding MPA management and the MPA program, the ocean community? We have about 28 minutes remaining. And this is our last question.
I'll just jump in. This is a little bit new. I think something we're grappling with is redefining what we mean by ocean community, and making sure we're focusing on the whole land sea connection and inland community. It's not just people that live and work right on the coast. Also really diversifying and looking at communities that have not traditionally been engaged in either, ocean recreation or just haven't felt comfortable along the coast. So that's just something we're being thoughtful of, is making sure everyone feels like they're part of an ocean community and bringing more people in and more people to feel a stewardship responsibility and feel comfortable in participating in kind of the long-term management process. So they don't feel like they're just a victim or disconnected or don't care at all. They feel like they're really part of this along with everybody else. So anything I think that can be done to encourage that shift, I think it's an important one that we need to make. And I know we have the support of the state in that direction, but I think it's something that we should maybe just call out explicitly to in the DMR of a direction to go in the future.
I totally and completely second that. I was just looking through the MLPA goals and looking for something about like equitable, like equity. So it's like protecting natural diversity, but like for whom? Like, is it just for the people who live on the coast, or like just the, you know, the people with mansions next to the water? Like, I agree, we need to make sure that it's clear that the MPAs are serving like everyone in California. So great point.
Yeah, Kala, with your, you know, exposure to communities across the whole state, have you seen any interest from groups that are kind of not traditionally associated with the ocean community? Like, do you have any like hints at ideas that you've been thinking about or even had some success with?
Yeah, I mean, we're working on getting that first question answered. So it's we're having a DEI series this spring where we kind of want to do a deep dive into specific communities and figure out, you know, why there hasn't been an interest or what those barriers are to engagement. Is it strictly transportation? Is it feeling uncomfortable or not welcome? And we're getting different answers. And I think just kind of figuring out what the obstacles and what the kind of the relationship different communities have with the coast, because it's not just with the coast, right? It's the whole social structure around it. And kind of, I think we need to dive into that question more. And some of the collaboratives have projects that have been funded by the state that are really specifically looking at answering that. But it's difficult because then you have to go into those communities that might feel uncomfortable or find, you know, point people that are already embedded in communities that can help answer these questions of why. And it's, you know, we're not always going to like the answers too. It's kind of, some of it is because we were forcibly removed. So it's, you know, it's a tricky one, but I think it's really, really important.
You know,
Especially,
Kala, I really appreciate that you brought this up, because I think this could be a beginning of this discussion, specifically tying it in to MPAs, and then to Gina's point, equity, right? And beginning that discussion. So it seems like it would be a really great opportunity for the collaborative network to share the information that you find with the department, right? And if we can get it in to a great level in the DMR, great, but it could also be a long-term project looking forward, right? And just to put it out there, the commission also has a coastal fishing communities project. And it was when I was marine advisor. So I know that we have a report that we put out there. And so that might be just an opportunity for you to reference some, you know, agency materials as you move forward in that. And then we could kind of come full circle. That, that there's definite potential there. So I think that that's a really great comment to bring up.
Yeah, please share anything that you think would be helpful. Okay. And the idea, just because, you know, so many of the different collaborators are working in this space, and then we are as a network too, the umbrella, we're hoping, I mean, wouldn't be in time for this DMR report, but to have another, you know, education outreach forum that shares the results of these projects, specifically with the DEI lens and social justice lens. So, and that would be in partnership with the state, of course, and all of our collaborative members. It's tough because it's like, I think at this point with the DMR, it's just acknowledging the need and having that be a part of our plan moving forward. I think is just what we have time for. I'm already like panicked about how I'm gonna provide the report by that end of January deadline. There's a lot to put in there. So, and I appreciate all of your work and pulling it together. It's a hefty lift.
It is, but that's why we have great partners, right? And we're pulling it all together, and you guys are really helping us as we're moving forward in the process to put pen to paper and start to write this and coordinate everything, is helping to understand what our partners are thinking, the results that they're presenting, what members of the public are hoping to see. Do they understand that this report is a transmittal of information by the department to the commission? And that's why Becky said in her presentation at the onset that when this report, this Decadal Management Review report, is delivered to the commission, we do not expect any action to take place. We do not expect any changes to individual MPAs or the MPA network. But what it will do is serve as a starting point for future discussions and any potential recommendations that the commission might have to the department to move forward. So that's why these questions, or where these questions can really come into play in thoughtful discussions moving forward. So that's why something like, okay, what are your recommendations for MPA management and the role of ocean community in the broader MPA program? Gosh, that's like a big ask, right? And we're giving you 20 minutes to wrap your head around that. But it becomes an important ask in the broader context. So I just want to put it out there. Sometimes, have a conversation and you walk away and you go, why didn't I say that? Or this is a brilliant idea. Mike, I'm going to speak for Mike as well on this, but we can be contacted at any time. You can email us, you can call us, and we can, make sure that we can have a discussion as department staff. That's something that we're always able to do. So if anything comes up after these conversations are done that you want to add, please reach out to us. And then just ask, is there anything else? Did any additional questions come up about the presentation, about the DMR deadline, about the types of monitoring that are going on right now, how your community, how your agency can plug in, anything, because we've covered all of the questions at this point. We have 19 minutes left. So if there's anything that you want to discuss or add, we have the time to do it.
I have a quick question. I couldn't see the whole beginning intro portion because I got a phone call during that, but I'm just curious, does each individual MPA have like specific monitoring, like a before and after monitoring program, or just specifically to test whether it worked, if it was successful?
Each individual MPA does not. Because there's 124 MPAs, we had to prioritize where to spend limited monitoring resources. So we came up with a tiered system. I'm trying to think some of the ranking criteria was things like, was there existing data collection already happening in these areas? Help me out, Elizabeth, if you can remember what the ranking categories were. There's also like the state marine reserves kind of ranked higher in that ranking. And so the long-term monitoring projects were asked to focus on the tier 1 and tier 2 MPAs. And that is one of the challenges that we have, is there's quite a few MPAs where there just hasn't been any monitoring, any significant state-funded, monitoring that's occurring.
Okay, thank you.
And then one thing that I'd like to add to that is that we have a baseline data collection, right?
Yeah.
And then the baseline kind of helped to inform long-term, and baseline as we're using it, is baseline at the time that MPAs were put into place. So that's like okay, day 0, MPA is in place, then moving forward. So that because depending on the agency or the type of environmental document or whatever, baseline can change. So for our purposes, that defined our baseline was day that the MPA was implemented.
And in some cases, there was more data collected during the baseline period than there is in this new tiered structure that we had to implement for long-term monitoring.
I had a thought actually, as Mike was talking about the 124 marine protected areas, and maybe this is to your earlier point, Elizabeth, about special closures, but that doesn't include special closures. And as I'm, going down and taking pictures of all the MPAs, I'm like, wait, I'm well over 124 here. There's definitely more. And this is especially the case on the North Coast, where we're special closure heavy. I think part of the messaging that needs to be included in some of the messaging, because I think we default to the 124, and it also skips the existing MPAs that are in San Francisco Bay, which we don't really know what to do with, but are still there. They're still on the books. This is just kind of my reaction to you saying that. I don't know if there's a way to think about how to message around those special closures that don't quote unquote officially count as MPAs, but are important to the community. I'm thinking especially like False Klamath Rock, where, they have the Eagle Eyes, MPA watch with the Yurok tribal members. There's some other important places that I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
I think that we could absolutely do a better job of messaging, and we kind of got forth. And right now there's people who are confused about the special closure or the various special closures and when are the seasons. And I know that the Gulf of Farallones has some special closures around down there. And so maybe, that could be something that we potentially look at clarifying in the DMR and as a need, because one of those 4 pillars is outreach and education. And part of the special closures were adopted as part of the MPA design process. So I don't think that your comment is off base at all, Kala. And I see Karen shaking her head, so I'm going to say that she might agree. Do you have anything to add, Faye?
And then I have something, interesting to add, is that according to the federal government, sanctuaries are MPAs. That's how they're defined. And so I was just smiling because we have to go that extra mile to say state MPAs anytime we're talking about your MPAs. And then what happens in the state of California is people don't use the word state MPAs, and then we come in as feds and say we're an MPA, and everyone's confused. They think we're a no-take Marine Reserve. So just some interesting federal state discourse disconnections there that cause issues with community outreach. So that's why I was agreeing and also saying it's even a bigger issue when you overlap with a federal Marine protected area.
I think, okay, so my brain is just kind of twirling right now. And in my brain, I see like a paragraph or 2 in the DMR that just clearly lays this all out. Don't know where it could be, if it's in the body or an appendix that deals with outreach and education, but this is kind of a key component, right? Because people are confused about the various entities that are enforcing designation. And it kind of all goes back to understanding the education and outreach of what the network is and what purpose that it serves. So,
or what an MPA is at all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and I think, it's especially, even if you have a sentence that says something, federally recognized marine protected areas are not these, that those are different entities or whatever, just even having that one sentence and then talking about what state MPAs are would be great, at least somewhere. But yeah, it just,
No,
I agree.
I think our messaging in the state is really lacking in that regard because we don't give that any attention really, except for maybe in like the Channel Islands or something where we where we have to talk about it, but we just kind of assume the only MPAs are our MPAs. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, the cross messaging with state and federal is hugely important. And then, yeah, just that special closures, I don't know if they can ever be included as MPAs. For all intents and purposes, at least from the enforcement side, they're in the code. They're listed with a number you can cite for unlawful entry. So, you know, we're enforcing them as MPAs. It's just, it's funny that they're not officially, it's like the little MPA stepchild. I know that's probably an appropriate term, but I don't know how, it's yeah, a little confusing to me. I think I agree with Karen, you know, having that all clearly laid out, or just identifying the need for that is a need in messaging.
Yeah, if nothing else, that messaging and clarity is a need, if nothing else. If agreement on what to call everything, it cannot be made, at least pointing out that it's an issue would be great.
That seems like a really achievable thing to put into the DMR, right? Like, and it makes total sense. So I think that's extremely helpful. Just kind of looking at the same issue from two different perspectives, I always value, or multiple perspectives. So I think we can absolutely work on that one. Just checking in, are there any other comments or questions on anything?
I don't have a comment on anything we've said, but I do need to leave a little bit early. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. This has been a great discussion.
Thanks, Gina.
Thanks,
See you
Gina.
later. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Okay, Karen or Kala, do you have anything?
Together, we're Kara.
Yeah. I wish you guys could see my dog. He's like distracting me right now. He's found the one comfortable patch of sunlight, and he'll just occasionally,
like by your leg or something.
Well, I have a heater that's right to my right, and he just got up from the heater and then went and plopped himself down in front of the sun. I've never met another creature who works so hard to just be comfortable and sleep. And I get nervous that he's just going to snore too loud. And
I haven't heard him at all. And I keep going on mute in part because they're doing construction in the apartment above me. And I feel like all you guys are hearing is the construction. So I apologize if I'm loud.
The joys of Zoom, right? You never know what people are doing. But, you know, I feel like hearing from everybody is a really great opportunity. And I just want to make great opportunity for us as the people going and starting to move forward and getting this report done. And so I want to make sure that there isn't something that we missed in our discussion, or that we didn't capture correctly in the notes, or anything, or there's any questions that you have. Is there anything at all?
No, I think this has been great. This has been thanks for facilitating even our small and mighty group.
Yeah, I'm happy. You know, you guys got your work cut out for you. This is going to be a big job. So
yeah,
good luck.
Thanks. You know, and did this webinar meeting structure work for you guys? Was it at a time that was something that you were able to easily plug in with? Okay.
Yes, I'm here because it was I would have attended in the evening too, because I know a lot of community meetings are in the evening, but it was great that it was actually the governance one was scheduled during the day. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. We can let the team know. So that's great feedback. Was there anything that didn't work? Like the introductory presentation was too long, or you would have liked to have questions and answers in the plenary session, or anything like that, as opposed to immediately coming to breakouts?
You know, I think it's hard personally for me to speak to what didn't work, in part because I'm super familiar with the MLPA, you know, including the fact that I used to work for Karen Garrison. So like, I'm super familiar with the MLPA. and everything about it. So for me, like, you know, I know you have to start, you know, with different levels of knowledge. So I think it was the right amount of information, you know, and I really appreciate that you have a rough timeline, but that you were also loose. I think that, you know, when you give the public expectations of timing, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. So I appreciated that.
Good.
You know, because the people will hold you to it, right? So,
Yeah.
So I thought that was great that you kind of gave these parameters of a timeline, but like, we're not doing this in March, you know what I mean? So I encourage you to, like, you know, keep it loose. If you
Thank
don't
you.
know you're going to make a specific deadline, you know.
We went back and forth on that. And that slide actually changed based on feedback from previous meetings. So I will take that feedback in particular back to the team.
As someone who plans for
Yeah.
processes and management plans and what have you, I can tell you that I've learned my lesson the hard way, not to be very specific with
Yeah.
it.
I agree. And then, are you both familiar with our DMR webpage on the department? So we have that, we have regular information posted to that. If there's anything that we didn't cover that you want to find out more information about, you can go there. You have our email. The MRC meeting on November 9th might be of interest. So the plan is, in the future, right, once this report is delivered to the commission, to potentially have a stakeholder event where it's kind of a day-long symposium. And so I would say we don't know exactly when it's going to be. We don't know exactly how long it's going to be. But we do know that it's something that we are planning towards. So if that's something that interests you, I would recommend plugging into either the MRC meetings to hear that discussion firsthand between the MRC and the department, or checking back on that DMR webpage to kind of gather those updates as they occur. And then, Mike, is there anything you want to add?
No, I got nothing.
Okay, come on. Oh, Henry heard come on and his eyes just opened.
Okay.
Thank you so much, especially for being able to connect with people on the North Coast. This has been great.
Oh, good. Well, like I said, we're glad that you joined our group, Karen. And I know Cala goes across the entire state, but is based out of the South Coast. So having those perspectives, I think, was really helpful. We have about 4 minutes left. And since I think that we've covered everything, it sounds like there's no additional comments. I would invite you to maybe just take those now 3 minutes and 56